Hello everyone. This is EUROSTUDENT Talks, and I'm very happy to welcome you all here today. At today's webinar, we are talking about a very intriguing topic for many countries when thinking about student life. It's about working while studying. And we are discussing this topic today based on the example of the Czech Republic. And we are very lucky in that sense that we can already have a sneak peek at EUROSTUDENT 8 results as well. I'm very glad that we have two wonderful speakers here today. They are both from the Center for Higher Education Studies in Prague, Lucia Hundlova and Mikaela Schmidova. Lucia has worked in the Center for Higher Education Studies in Prague over 10 years already. Her work has focused on the attitudes and living conditions of students at Czech universities. She is mainly interested in the topics of non-traditional students and working while studying. Lucia has participated in several surveys focusing on students at the Czech higher education institutions, for example, EUROSTUDENT, PhD students in the Czech Republic, students preparing for teaching professions, and so on. And EUROSTUDENT 8 is her first participation in the EUROSTUDENT project. Secondly, as I said, we have here Mikaela, who has studied general anthropology at Charles University in Prague. Her main research interests are students' values, dropout in higher education, non-traditional students, and also outside of the higher education field, the prejudices in the Czech society. Mikaela deals with quantitative as well as qualitative research, and EUROSTUDENT 8 is her second experience within the project. So thanks again for joining us, and I can already give the word to you because we are all definitely already looking forward for your presentation.
Thank you, Marlene. Thank you for introducing us and our presentation. We have already uploaded the presentation, so I hope that everybody can see it. Please let me know if it is okay. Okay. As you can see from the title of the presentation, the topic of the presentation is working while studying in the Czech Republic. At the beginning, short intro, why we chose this topic, working while studying. Firstly, we consider this topic to be an important one. We wrote a study about this topic in 2020. It was based on the EUROSTUDENT 7 data. And the second reason, it's kind of a trigger for choosing and speaking about this topic. It was in autumn 2022. This topic was discussed in the Czech media. It has started on Twitter, and then it was discussed in several newspapers. And it has actually started with the picture from EUROSTUDENT 7 publication. The picture you can see on the screen. And the picture describes the students' employment during the lecture period and lecture-free period. And as you can see, the show graphs that the highest proportion of working students in the lecture period and lecture-free period is among the Czech students. The discussion in the media raised several questions. You can see the questions below. It was, for example, do the students have to work? Does it have a negative effect on studies? What the high proportion of working students says about the quality of higher education? Does relatively low public support have consequence for higher proportion of working while studying? So we will probably not answer these questions completely, but we will try to show you what the situation looks like in the Czech Republic. So the structure of the presentation is as follows. At first, some information about data. Then I will give you some insight in the context working while studying in the Czech Republic. And then we will show you some results based on the EUROSTUDENT data. And we will use the questions from the debate, from the media debate, as a guiding line. It will be, we will use them as a structure of the presentation. And at the end, we will sum up the results and ask some questions. So about the data information, in our presentation, we will describe the situation of working students in the Czech Republic based on EUROSTUDENT 7 and 8. In some cases, there will be a comparison. So the data from EUROSTUDENT 7, they are final weighted, they are from June 29. We can work with nearly 20,000 respondents. Cases response rate was 7%. And the current data, they are preliminary, they are weighted. The field work was in 2022. We can work with nearly 15,000 cases, and the response rate was even lower. It was about 5%. I would like to emphasize that the data from current survey, they are really preliminary. We are not at the end, actually. They are weighted, they are okay, but not, they are preliminary. And one more information, that in this presentation, we will speak mainly about full-time students who are working during the lecture period. Why we decided like that? Because the part-time students, they are workers, mainly workers rather than students. So this is a different situation. So in short, a context, working while studying. It has been a common part of the university study life in the Czech Republic for quite a long time. And moreover, it's not only about the part-time form of study, but about the full-time studying as well. So we don't actually perceive the period of higher education studies as an exclusive learning period in which the students only devote their time to studies. And one of the indicators that illustrate the situation is how students work before entering the university for the first time. And we are talking about more than half of the students' population in EUROSTUDENT 7, in EUROSTUDENT 8 as well. So the context of the situation in the Czech Republic can be described in the following graphs as well. There are two important levels. It's form of study and type of study program. If you look at the first graph, form of study, traditionally there is a difference between part-time study students and full-time study students. Part-time form of study is traditionally for the working students. You can see it on the graph that more than 90% of them, they work. But the full-time students, they work as well. It's about 2/3 of them who work. So as we have already mentioned, the study period at university is no more longer perceived as the time when students only study. And it can be described like that the Czech universities declare to prospective students the possibility of balancing study and work. It was quite evident a few years ago when there was a demographic decline. That the universities wanted or tried to attract students. So, so working is not new for the full-time students as well. And what we can see in the graph, it's quite visible that there is a lower proportion of full-time students working while studying in EUROSTUDENT 8 in comparison with EUROSTUDENT 7. And we are wondering why, but we assume that it may be the impact of COVID situation. The labor market has changed a lot. Students lost their jobs, so it could be this way. And what about the type of study program? As you can see, the most frequent workers are master's students, then bachelor students, and then long master students. And for the context of, in the Czech Republic, in the Czech environment, the long master's students in long master's program, they represent a specific group of students. Most of them, they study medicine and law. And these study fields are studied by students with better families, so socioeconomic backgrounds. So maybe they don't need to work so hard. And secondly, especially medical study fields are demanding in terms of study load. So maybe it's the other reason that the proportion of working students in long master program is significantly lower. So now the first question, do the students have to work? That's the first question from the media debate. We are not going to say yes or no directly. And we will focus on socioeconomic background and educational background of students. Many studies show that the Czech education system reproduces socioeconomic inequalities. Mainly it concerns the lower levels of education, primary and secondary, but we also see inequalities in tertiary education as well. So I would say that socioeconomic background really matters. And so it is the educational background and parents' financial status. You can see it on the graphs that the higher parental education and the better financial situation of the student's family, that means a slightly lower share of employed students. What are the reasons for working while studying? The reasons for working in the survey in EUROSTUDENT, they were represented in 5 different statements. And the strongest agreement among the students was with the statement, I work so I can afford things I otherwise would not buy. More than or nearly 80% of them agreed with the statement. And one of the dimension, one of the statements could be described as the necessity of working while studying. It is the statement, without my paid job, I couldn't afford to be a student. And it can be interpreted as the proportion of economically at-risk students. And if we look at this statement again, from the perspective of socioeconomic background, we can see that the better family's financial situation is, the less students agree with this statement. And okay, so students, their families' financial situation is well off. They mostly say they don't work to afford to be a student. Okay. So does it have a negative effect on studies? Just the another question from the media debate. At first, we will look at the students' time budget. This graph, it shows the time spent on taught studies, personal study time, and paid jobs by time spent on paid jobs. So on the horizontal axis, there's the time spent on paid jobs, and on the other axis there are hours per week. So we know it from the last round and from this result as well, this result shows that a job comes at the expense of time students can spend on their studies. So when job starts to be time demanding, time on study decreases. So when you look at the graph, students who don't work at all, they spend about 38 hours on their study-related activities, and students who work more than 20 hours, they spend on study-related activities about 28 hours. Time budget. Time budget can be also connected with the study load. We can assume that that higher study load means that it's more difficult to combine studying with a job. In the graph, we can see that there are some study programs that requires a relatively large amount of time for studying. For example, natural sciences, architecture, medicine, pharmacy, natural sciences. And on the other hand, there are study programs that where students spend less hours on their studies. For example, humanities, languages, services, education, science. And usually, when there is a lower study intensity, students spend more time at work and vice versa. So this is best seen. On these two field of studies, medicine and pharmacy, where only or about 1/3 of them work. And this was one perspective. Another perspective is the proximity of the work and study field. At the previous graph, we saw that some fields, soft studies, have a low study load and high share of students with paid jobs. And we can see that these students from soft studies, I would say, humanities, social sciences, languages, welfare, they said that the job is related to their, that is not so much related to their study, field of study. You can see it here. And on the other hand, there are field of studies like architecture, ICT, law, engineering, where more than half of the students work. And one of the last slides from my side, it's another approach. It's more subjective approach. It's the study performance. Performance in study in comparison to other fellow students. And here we can see the comparison between the not working and working students. And we can see that there are more or less no differences. So this is like from my side, it's everything, and I will give the floor to Michaela.
Thank you, Lucy. This last draft was for us very surprising, but it's also nothing new. It happens also in EUROSTUDENT 7 that these people who are workers or non-workers during studies, they actually evaluate themselves very similarly, and not only in this perspective, but also there is no any other, let's say, connection between those who works, for example, only 5 hours per week and more than 20, for example. The attitudes or opinions on their performance is still very similar. It could be quite surprising for me. I think I will continue with 2 other questions which arose from the public debate. This one is quite, let's say, tricky. What the high proportion of working students can say us about the quality of higher education in the Czech Republic. Of course, the quality is very complex notion, so I don't want to explain more about it, but it's from the public debate, so we can assume that this is very general meaning of the word quality. The Czech context for the answering the question is that we are currently, and not currently, but also maybe more than 15 years in phase of universal higher education system, but we can still see or feel the nostalgia for so-called elite higher education. It means that only those students who study hard and intensively can successfully finish their studies. So it implies that those who work during their studies, they actually can't be successful because they don't spend enough time by studying. That's the first comment or for context situation. Another one can be the information that in the Czech Republic there is, as similar in other countries, high ratio on unsuccessful studies. So dropout is quite high, and especially it stands for the students of the first year in their bachelor study. But we can, of course, guess or have some polemics about if it is a symptom of high quality or difficulty of higher education or not. Of course, it's again something what is very complicated to answer in, let's say, in this presentation. But we will try to show you some examples of it. First of all, there is example which are taken from the application of Ministry of Education about higher education students. We can find here that bachelor studies starting in 2018, there is in 3 or 4 years after that, there is a 55 unsuccessful studies. That's one example. And another one about the first year students, those who started their bachelor studies in 2020. In 2021, there was 41 unsuccessful studies. Of course, there are some limitation, maybe very big limitation, because we don't know what happened with those students who left the study concrete study program. So they could also to completely abandon the higher education, but they also can change their opinions on study programs and they can transfer to another one. So it's only contextual information. It is that's the general context of the situation, and now you can see graph which represents results from EUROSTUDENT 7, because something changed for the EUROSTUDENT 8. In EUROSTUDENT 7, there were some questions or statements regarding difficulties during the studies. And what was surprising for us, that the biggest difficulty during the studies which students perceived was really surprisingly connected with the demanding or standard demands of study program. And we divided students for working and not working, and we can see that only difference is visible, which is again quite interesting, that students who are not working, they more often agree with the statement that they have difficulties with standard demands of study program. There is, let's say, more than about 5% of difference, but it's only difference between those two groups. So, and we can also judge the differences between students who study bachelor, master, and long master. For bachelors, standard demands of study program are generally the most difficult thing. But as I said, this is only EUROSTUDENT 7. We don't have a data for EUROSTUDENT 8 because this part was not included into the last version of questionnaire. Another perspective which give us the EUROSTUDENT 8 data is based on dropout intention. There was in a questionnaire traditionally included some statements again about the, let's say, attitudes towards studying, and one of them was the assessment about assessment of if students have seriously thinking about completely abandoning their studies. We have tried to, let's say, analyze it through simple linear regression, and we can see that students who tend to assess their attitude towards their studying has more often dropout intention. They subjectively evaluate themselves as with worse performance with other fellow students in comparison, and they are usually more often in bachelor studies and spending more time in job, which is rather not close to the content of their study program. So this is very general, let's say, trends if we see the quality or difficulty of higher education in a simple assessment of dropout intention or expression of dropout intentions. This is we also try to do some, let's say, additional analysis on this approach, because there are some studies which say that there exists a critical intensity of working while studying. I found one article which dealt with this idea or thinking, and there is some, let's say, information that's somehow critical and with negative impact on studies. There is a 10 or 11 hours per week of job during studies. So we tried to do some kind of analysis if this, let's say, something what was not verified but was confirmed in other studies is also visible in our data. It was quite simple analysis in form of cross tabulation, but in the graph there you can see adjusted residuals where it means that if you focus on the, let's say, it's yellow, I think it's yellow column, people who had intention to drop out, more often they have usually they are working during their studies more than 13 hours a week. In the middle of the graph, there is a, let's say, neutral position of or comparison of these two indicators, and the last one, no intention to drop out. It's visible that those who are working less, they have no such critical view on it, or not so often to have a critical view on dropout intention. So that's it. It seems that working more 13 hours means or leads to a more often intention to drop out. And the last question, we was wondering if we should to show it now for the today presentation, because we are still on the progress. Our data are not in this case very well prepared yet, because we found some mistakes in it, but we are glad that we found them quite early. But to be honest, the graph you can see here is very probably that the same will be also for the EUROSTUDENT 8. This graph from synopsis of indicators represent EUROSTUDENT 7, but the graph where Czech Republic has the relatively high proportion of working student, but very low national public support when as a share of student total monthly income, this graph will very probably look very similar. Why? There is a quite long-term same context. State pays health and social insurance for all students up to 26 years, but these money are not visible or shown in data. It's not included into this graph. But that's the general information. But system of public support, especially means-tested stipendiums and accommodation stipendiums, these are main two types of public support, is very stable and long existed, no big changes. What more, in the Czech Republic does not exist public or private loans with the specific focus on student, including, for example, better repayment terms. So students they have quite good, let's say, a disposal, for example, accommodation stipendium, but the money which goes to them are quite low. Actually, they are only a very small part of their total income. So that's the last question. We tried to show you some impression on from our current data. Let me to give you some not real trends, but rather conclusions and maybe new questions to us and also to you. I would like to emphasize that what is really new in the data of EUROSTUDENT 8 in the Czech Republic is visible lower proportion of full-time students working while studying. But we can say if it is a trend or just deviation which is connected, for example, with the situation of pandemic. Of course, and it is very natural, situation of working while studying is connected with lower socioeconomic and educational background of their families. But it seems that the motivation to work has, let's say, more complex reasons. It's not mainly like financial situation in which students are, but also they would like to be maybe more independent of their families, and they would like to have some own sources for money. And of course, as Lucia told before, higher education institution also try to fulfill the promises that it is possible to combine working and studying, also for the students who are as a full-time students. What more, Czech Republic is quite a low proportion of students who works to ensure they study. We also have a look on EUROSTUDENT 7 results and saw the cross-country comparison. And it was, I think, 20 only very low when we compared the situation in the Czech Republic in agreement with the statement, without my paying job, I could not afford to be a student, which is, as also Lucia said, the indicator for for students which are at risk from the financial reasons. As we also think that or can assume that the job has no necessarily negative effect on study, but there is a question of job intensity and as well as on let's say study intensity or demands on it from the side of the study program. Intention to drop out is higher among students working more than 13 hours per week. But it seems that subjective evaluation of performance is same for both working and non-working. When we prepared the presentation for you, we was wondered what can be your experience. I personally, I am very curious about what are real public opinions on working during studies in your countries, because as I told before, we sometimes feel that exists some stereotyping about higher education and what should be done during the higher education studies. So I'm really curious, what are your experience with your society, and maybe how do you explain reasons for working while studying in your countries? How, if they are, how are reasons to work different from the Czech situation we tried to describe? Sorry. And that's for now, that's all. If you have any ideas after the ending of our session, you can contact, email us, and we will be very glad to have something from you and information, ideas, questions, other questions. So thank you for listening us.
Thank you, Mihaela and Lucia. It was really, really interesting, definitely, and I really open up the question and answers part of the webinar. So actually you asked the questions from our other listeners, so please, everyone, feel free to comment. And yeah, Robert raised hand, please feel free.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for your presentation, and I have two comments because I'm currently working with a colleague on a paper on dropout and labor market and the possible interconnections between it. And the first one is about the wording that you had on your one slide that that much % of bachelor students are unsuccessful in their studies. And I think from what I have read so far, this notion is a little bit conflicted right now, because dropping out does not necessarily have to mean that you, I mean, you're probably aware of this, but I just wanted to add it. Does not necessarily have to mean bad labor market prospects. And as we have found, for example, it can also indicate a very fluid transition. So you start to work, then you maybe get a good traction in the field where you work, which is, especially if it's related to your study program, and then you maybe decide to drop out because you are already that well integrated into the labor market. And this is also, at least in Austria, not so uncommon pathway why people drop out. And also in that sense, your findings also match with some other countries that also have found that having a job, especially more hours besides studies, is one reason that can increase the dropout likelihood. And the other comment is also related to this, because in one of the last slides, you have showed this kind of not cross-table, you know, the chart regarding the public support for students. And even in countries, where, for example, Norway, which is pretty high up on both of the axes, even there it was found that people start working part-time or even more, regardless of the good public support structures. And if they do so, they are still, of course, at higher probability of dropping out of the studies. So yeah, that's the 2 points that I would want, or that I wanted to add from my current readings and works.
Thank you for your comments. I will start maybe with the last one, or maybe it's a general thing. These things we share with you are not, let's say, we are aware that sometimes we simplified quite a lot the question, but it's also because of the public debate, because we saw that the public debate was quite simplified, and we tried to find the clue how to answer, for example, not to, let's say, only experts on the topic, but also to the public. So we try to, let's say, to use how to use that data for enriching the the public debate. That was one general intention regarding the public support. We maybe didn't emphasize enough that the share of working students was very high, not only in EUROSTUDENT 7 and EUROSTUDENT 8, but also EUROSTUDENT 6. Czech Republic was almost always among the countries where the working during studies was had the higher proportion in Europe, in countries which participated in EUROSTUDENT. So this is nothing what has changed. So that's maybe we can't. We have to find reasons for that situation, not only in data, but also mainly in outside of data, if I can say. So that's why we try to explain more context of the situation, because we saw that the same results from different countries, they can have a different reasons, let's say. So that's all what I can add.
Yes, and we also have one question from Frederick in the chat, and after that I will also take Auna's comment or question, but first the one in the chat. Frederick from Sweden asked that, do you find gender differences among students who say that without my paid job, I could not afford to be a student?
I think that.
Have you looked on that as well, the gender aspect?
Not this data, I mean last wave, but if I am right, there is no gender difference in this question or statement. But I remember that, of course, and it is also something what is possible to expect, that there is a different gender difference between those who when we asking if they work because they have to support somebody from the family. There is a huge gender difference, because of course female students, they usually agree most with this statement. This is more important. I think that maybe women are, let's say, not forced, but they need to work because more often from financial reasons. But the difference is not such a big like the second one statement.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Auna, please.
Hello. My camera is okay, now it's on. I come from University of Tartu, Estonia, and thank you so much for organizing, and thank you so much for the presentation. It's a really important topic. And as you said that you are one of the countries that have been where the students work the most, I think we share the first places. Estonian students also work a lot, and what we have seen, what I wanted to say is the change. What we have seen during the last EUROSTUDENT studies is that the students work more for the reason to gain work experience, and but still the economical reasons are the first ones. You know, I mean, they want to buy more things, and they want to cover they need to cover their living costs. And the fourth reason actually is that they couldn't afford higher education. And I think, if I do remember from your figure correctly, actually less Czech students said that. Among Estonian students, it's altogether 45% of students say that they agree or totally agree with this fact that they couldn't afford higher education if they wouldn't work, which is rather high. But gaining work experience is even more important reason. And what else? What I wanted to say, it's a comment to your slide showing that the working students estimate that they manage with the studies equally well with the ones who don't work. It's of course quite sympathetic. I mean, it's people who have lower skills. They usually say that, I mean, they are happy with the level of the skills, so they maybe don't have higher aims. Actually, they have somehow managed to agree that that's the level they want to complete. Maybe they don't have higher ambitions. So it's interesting to see that. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for the comment. Do you, Michaela or Lucia, want to add something?
Maybe to gaining experience, like the answer that they are trying to gain experience with labor market during study. I would like to add only one, again, contextual information that is really logical reason for students. If we knew that employers, they usually are very focused on people who have some experience, and they expect even from the side of graduate that they will have some experience with working. So that was part of pressure from the another side to student to work more. It was like, it starts, I think that this let's say pressure start very early, in maybe even in 90s of 20th century in the Czech Republic, that employers expect that all graduates, or they will have some experience with labor work. And another thing is, of course, to achieve some independent, or effort to achieve some independence during the studies, because they usually don't want to use only parental financial resources for their lives during their higher education studies. That's all.
Any other questions or comments? Anybody? Until our listeners are still thinking a bit, I was also wondering about one aspect. As we saw, Czech students are working quite a lot while studying, and we can imagine that having the high load of working commitments and also study hours, it can be quite stressful. Have you already managed to look into the data about students' mental health and well-being? How does the situation affect this side of students' lives?
Unfortunately, we don't have analyzed this part of data, which is quite, let's say, rich in this EUROSTUDENT aid. But we can have again information, or 2 or 3 notes to it. I think that during the years 2019 and 2022 have maybe dramatically changed context in the Czech society regarding expressing or talking about mental health. Pandemic situation led to the situation when people, including students, they started not to be afraid to talk about this. It was not tradition to say or to share with somebody else that I have some mental problems. That this is completely new situation for us, and it's starting to be visible more and more. It was also because of many surveys has been done during the COVID situation, which was focused on mental health. So for people, it started to be more normal to answer the question on it. And but it is, I think, very similar to other countries. It these surveys showed others during the pandemic. Higher education or university students were the most impacted society group regarding, let's say, for example, level of depression and anxiety. It was really in this way that this specific, not so big, but quite big part of society was really depressed and full of anxiety. It was also because of the, let's say, distant education was in the Czech Republic so long, and was actually the longest in the, maybe not only in the Europe, but also in the world. So that was another. And I am very glad that we have now the possibility to analyze such, as I said, rich data on not only on mental health in EUROSTUDENT 8, but also on discrimination, which is also one of the, let's say, topic which was hidden in the society, in the Czech society, or it has some stigma. And now I am very curious about the results in this part of questionnaire.
Yes, thanks for explaining this topic as well. First, Aune, and after that, Karl also will ask or comment, so please.
Yeah, thank you again. I just wanted to add to my previous comment that the question you actually asked was whether the same questions are in our public debate, and I just wanted to say that very much the same questions, that why students work and why they have to work so much, and how it's affecting the quality of the studies, and all these questions are in Estonian media also very high up. But regarding this mental health question, I also wanted to comment because we added some national questions to the last EUROSTUDENT questionnaire on mental health, a specific scale actually, measuring the different aspects of mental health problems, like fatigue and depression and anxiety, and there was something else. And this special analysis was done on that, and what was maybe surprising for me as a psychologist, that the students who were most affected, or whose mental health was most at risk, were the ones who were bachelor students continuing their studies directly after gymnasium and not working and not having family, but having economic difficulties. So the ones who have the economic difficulties were one of the risk factors, while working and having family was actually opposite. So the ones who are adults and decide to study, they probably sort of somehow manage with this, balancing the work and study load, and maybe they sort of accept this fact that they can't put so much time on studies. So that was special. So if you're interested, it's in Estonian only, but I think it was an interesting piece of research. Thanks.
Yes, indeed, it's interesting. And I was also, when listening to Aune, thinking about the fact that when we think about first-year bachelor students, for example, they are the ones actually who are often moving out of parents' house and starting like a new chapter in their life. So maybe this is also one factor that can contribute to the higher level of stress, maybe that when there are difficult times. Anyways, Karl also wanted to ask or comment something, so please.
Hello from Vienna, and thanks a lot for really these interesting insights. I totally agree that I find a lot of similarities. So I think that's not a lot of the main points somehow remind me on things that are equal in the Austrian situation. I have just one detailed question. You had a graph, and I think I haven't got it, so sorry. You had a graph where you separated the workers from the non-workers. and said, okay, which part of your study do you find more difficulties? And you had an effect on the core study or something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Standard demands on study.
And what was it the case that the working group?
That one?
Yeah. And I would read it that way, that the working group says on a bachelor level, it's easier for me. Or okay, I got that right.
Yeah. That's really surprising, actually.
Okay. And have you separated them to the hours, because you had this 13 hours issue? And okay, because maybe that's in effect, and that would lead to my question: how big are the groups? Are more students on a employment that is less than 13 hours, or more? So this group is bigger until 13 hours working.
I don't have it in my head now, but I can try it. We didn't divide these two groups into more detailed categories. Let's say, as I thought, it's unfortunately we don't have a EUROSTUDENT 8 for this, because that, as I told before, these questions disappeared, or not now but we can check it in EUROSTUDENT 7.
What I was thinking about is, we found that, but that's just an institutional questionnaire or questionnaires. We found that persons who are working within this 10 hours range often seem to be more organized also in their study life than the persons who do not work at all, because they have to, I don't know, organize the working, and or maybe it's a selection effect, that if you're organized person, you go into that, whatever. But maybe that could describe the effect, that the group of these persons in the working group is quite high, and they found it easy. Yeah, and that was my thought about that.
Yeah, that was also our, let's say, thinking, that people on bachelor studies who have more problems with, let's say, time management of not only studying but also working, if they work, they have maybe more problems with demands of standard demands of study programs, because of complicated situation after, let's say, high school. That's different world studying at university. So bachelor studies are very critical point of let's say educational career of students. So I agree with you.
And one final question, sorry. The big N on this graph is the persons who fill out the questionnaire, not the whole population, because it's written big.
It's full-time students, only full-time students in EUROSTUDENT 7.
Right.
So no part-time students, because as we said before, they are completely different. We can't compare them with their attitudes towards working, because they are working a lot and they are able to manage their studies, because of they are more motivated, if we can compare them with full-time students.
Okay, but 12,000 persons filled out the questionnaire.
Full-time students. We had together 20,000.
Okay.
20,000.
Good. Thank you. Thanks.
Yes, thanks for everyone. I think it's time to wrap up this very exciting discussion here. Thank you, Lucia. Thank you, Michaela. And thanks to all our listeners for being here, for commenting, for asking. I think it was a pleasure. And this is the EUROSTUDENT Talks for today, but you can already save the date for the next webinar. It will be the 16th of February, and very likely we will be lucky enough to take a look on EUROSTUDENT 8 results, and in February we will do it very probably about Estonia. So thanks for listening, and see you next time in February.
Thank you. Have a nice day.